such an honor to be here on your 10-year anniversary. Congratulations on that, and congratulations on moving the time it takes to get a district created from 24 months to 12 months. Big round of applause for that. Great job. You guys are doing more here than we did in the U.S. Over many, many years. So you have an awful lot to be proud of. Well, welcome from the land of Donald Trump. Just when we thought it couldn't get any crazier, it gets crazier and crazier. And I don't know if you saw in the news yesterday, his chief of staff was indicted for assaulting one of the protesters. The good news is most commentators don't think he's got any shot of winning the general election, but it certainly has been a wild and crazy ride, and every rule that we thought about politics before has changed. This afternoon, well, for me, it's about 3:30 in the morning. So this afternoon, I wanted to talk to you for just a minute about what tourism improvement districts are. I want to talk about the growth of these districts. I'm going to talk to you about a national study we did about a year ago, and then I brought along 3 case studies for you this afternoon. So first up is we have done a lot of work at CIVITAS for BIDS. For about 25 years, we've been creating BIDS and tourism improvement districts. And one of the things we did in the funding model is we looked at all the different funding allocations for tourism promotion. And we broke them into 2 buckets, public funding and private funding. And on the public side, we have what we call untethered allocations, meaning they're not linked to anything else. Some part of the government, whether it's a local entity or a state entity in the states, grants discretionary money to a destination marketing organization or DMO, and it changes wildly from year to year. Tethered allocations, they're linked to something else, some portion of the hotel tax, for example. Very rare are dedicated taxes. We've seen some sales tax increment financing where you actually look at how much sales tax is generated in one year, and the next year, that overage attributable to tourism gets funded back into tourism promotion. But by far the most common has been assessments. And this is usually where I ask my US audience, who knows the difference between an assessment and a tax? And usually we don't get any hands. In the United States, there are 3 different kinds of levies. There are taxes, there are assessments, and there are fees. And each one of those is different. The hallmark of assessments is that they're based on benefit, that you must provide benefit back to the payers. And so these historically were used for sewer lines and water lines and roadway improvements. And in fact, the concept of an assessment dates back to early English common law. About 50 years ago, some folks said, why can't we use that same model for our downtown activities? And the first business improvement district was born. And about 25 years ago, some folks in California said, if we can use it for sewer lines and we can use it for downtown improvements, why can't we use it as a stable source of funding for tourism promotion? And that was the very first tourism improvement district. Now, on the other side of the ledger, the private side of the funding, you're all very familiar with these: membership, sponsorships, event revenue, and contract services. We see destination marketing organizations doing all of these. So what is a tourism improvement district? Essentially, it is an assessment on the hotels, and predominantly it is hotels driven. In some places, there are some other tourism-related businesses that are included, and I'll talk about that in just a second. It's collected by the city or county, and it's managed privately by the destination marketing organization. So I want to tell you one thing about BIDS in terms of, and all of you I know have a lot of experience in BIDS, there are 3, in my view, really important characteristics of BIDS. And we can use the word dig. It's like a California, like we dig bids, right? Dig. Dedicated funding is number 1. Number 2 is the funding is in addition to what is done before, or the services are in addition. That is, the services are supplemental. And 3, governance. Governance by the private sector, okay? Those 3 really important characteristics of business improvement districts. They also are key characteristics of tourism improvement districts. They are dedicated, that is, the money cannot be moved to another place. They are supplemental, and they are governed and managed by the private sector. So the assessment is done one of 2 ways, either based on a percentage, looks very much like a hotel tax, or a fixed rate per occupied room per night, $1, $2, $3. It is stable, the money can't be diverted. So as long as your funding source is a funding source that can go for a different purpose on merely a vote of the local government or the state government, you will always be at risk. And I've seen articles that there's some proposals out there to raise hotel taxes and other things like that. You are always at risk for insatiable governments that want money, always, to take that money and use it for something else. And unless you can get out of that paradigm, unless you can get into a paradigm where the money is dedicated and can't be moved, you will always be fighting those battles. And by the way, in the United States, we're losing those battles. When we argue for more money from the local government, and we're arguing against police and fire and parks, we lose. We lose because those political forces are much stronger, typically, than the tourism industry. And so this was a way to say, we will have dedicated, stable funding for tourism promotion. And we all know how important tourism promotion is. You all know that. In the United States, 1 out of every 9 jobs comes from tourism. We raise enough state and local taxes on tourism to pay the salary, more than pay the salary of every police officer and every firefighter in the country. It is a tremendous economic engine, but it's an industry that doesn't get a lot of support. It's an industry that, when we talk about industries on a national basis in the U.S., we're talking about the auto industry and talking about healthcare and financial services. Tourism often gets left behind. And so this was a response to that problem, to say we want something that gives us our fair share, a dedicated source for tourism promotion. So the other aspect of these districts is you can use a new or existing nonprofit. In the past, when we've set up business improvement districts, we're usually setting up a new entity. I think here you call them bid corporations or bid companies. We do it through nonprofit corporations in the U.S. Typically, when we do a tourism improvement district, we're using an existing destination marketing association. There is local government oversight. There's once-a-year reporting. There is the assurance by the government, essentially, that the money is going to be spent consistent with the plans. Here's a bit about the growth of these districts. Started in West Hollywood. I don't know how many of you have been to West Hollywood or know anything about that place. It's a wild place, but they started it way back in 1989. In the first 10 years, we only had 3 districts. It was very slow growth. In the last 15, we've had 93 districts. Okay? 96 districts now in California. You know how much they're raising for local destination marketing organizations in California? California is a big place. Population's about 40 million. But they're raising over $200 million a year. That's about, what is that, about 140 million pounds, if my math is right, something like that, a year for only the locals. So they are a significant force now in California, and they're rapidly moving into other states. You can see 17 in Montana, 15 in South Dakota, and on down. These are all states now that have these districts. Here's a list of possible future districts, and this is the growth that we've seen, tremendous growth of these districts over their history, with now 154 districts strong. Here's a map. Shows you a map of the U.S. here. You can see started in California and moved predominantly through the West. Washington, Montana have the most next to California. We did a district in Portland, Oregon a few years ago, and you can see they've moved into the Midwest. We did a district in Wichita, Kansas, Colorado, South Dakota, Tennessee. You can see all of these. And guess how many states are in the process of putting one of these together? There's 11 on this map here. 11 more. Right now are in process to look at these districts. Most predominantly, of course, will be Florida and New York, and I suspect that we will have our first TID in those states very soon. Okay, we did a national TID study surveying all the tourism improvement districts in the U.S., and I included in this presentation just a couple of results that I wanted to share with you. So one of the things we asked the destinations is, how much did you increase your funding when you did a TID? How much did your funding go up? Startling, 192%, almost double. In general, they almost doubled the budgets of the destination marketing organizations. That is a staggering statistic. One other statistic that we got was how many of you have raised the assessment since you put it in place? About 30%, almost a third had raised their assessments they put it in place. Remember, most of these districts are less than 10 years old. We also asked, what was the primary reason for your destination forming a tourism improvement district? And you see by far the most, insufficient existing funding, 39%. No existing tourism funding, 23%. Those two are 62% of the total right there. But you can see others lost some of their funding. They wanted to stay competitive, a variety of answers to that question. So I have 3 case studies to share with you today. And obviously, the U.S. has a lot of differences from here. First of all, the tax burden on hotels is less. Your tax burden is high, but ours varies widely. In the United States, the laws for BIDs and TIDs vary from state to state to state. So we have 50 different bid laws with 50 different sets of rules. Same for TIDs. One of our great justices, Supreme Court justices, Justice Brandeis, called the states laboratories of democracy. Maybe you would say laboratories of democracy, right? These were tests. We could test things out in one state, and if it worked, it could spread to others. If it didn't work, then it would only be stuck on one state. Well, in California, the amount of tax paid varies a great deal from one location to the next. San Diego's one of the lowest. And you can see on this, the total that the customer pays at checkout, and this is in addition to your bill, is 12.5%. 2% of that goes straight into the TID fund. It raises over $30 million a year to promote San Diego. Now, this is a great one for you to check out in terms of the way they go about doing their funding. They have an application process where people can come in and say, we will produce room nights for you and if you fund us. And here's what we will produce, and we will study it, and we will make sure that we, in fact, do produce what we said we're going to do. It is all based on return on investment. It is all based on marketing, specifically driving more visitors to the destination. That is what this $30 million is used for. They will not look at an application if it is less than 3-to-1 ROI. That is, if the hotel revenue is less than 3 times the amount that they're proposing to spend, they will not look at that application. And what they would tell you is over a 5-year period, their ROI, the amount they spend versus hotel revenue generated, is 19-to-1. Now, that's a very high number. Some of it is difficult to measure. If I had to measure, I would guess that they're closer, somewhere between 10 and 15-to-1, but that is tremendous. I mean, even if you raise $1 million a year and the ROI is 10-to-1, we're talking about $10 million in extra hotel room revenue that would not have happened but for the programs of the TID. San Diego obviously is an intense leisure destination, really selling those beaches, really selling the idea of coming to California and having a great time. We see all kinds of destinations, and that's a big one, right? We've got medium-sized. The next one I'm going to talk about is a medium-sized destination of Napa. But we also have many small districts that are raising $200,000 a year or $100,000 a year to do their destination promotion efforts. Same concept, same model, stable funding for destination marketing. The story in Napa was, back in 2010, they were terrible in their funding for marketing, and they were getting clobbered by their neighbors. They were spending about $500,000 a year marketing Napa, and their neighbors were spending much more. So we helped them put together a TID, and here you see, by the way, the naming is all different. Tourism Business Improvement District, TBID. What a lot of places have used now is Tourism Improvement District, so you'll see TID, and here you got another one, TMD. Anybody know what that stands for? Tourism Marketing District. Okay, to really emphasize the marketing aspect. All the same thing. It raises $6 million a year for Napa, and out the door, the guests are paying 14%. And you actually see that on your bill when you check out, 14% additional. And that 14% isn't all TMD. Most of that is tax. And here you can see, back when they started, Napa was way down there at $500,000. Sonoma, their neighbor, was spending in excess of $4 million. Monterey was above $4 million. And even tiny little Livermore was spending over $2 million a year. They started losing market share, and they started losing it rapidly. So we helped them put this in place to actually do the marketing that they needed to bring visitors to Napa. There was a sense, by the way, and I've seen this in a lot of iconic destinations like this, that hey, we're Napa, everybody knows about us, we don't need to market. Wrong. They were losing market share terribly. And what happened since, they involved all 5 cities in the county. So this is another important difference of tourism improvement districts. They tend to be citywide or countywide or multiple cities, not just one area of a city like a business improvement district. As I mentioned, $6 million, they levy 2%, and they take 1/4 of it and they push it down to locals. Now, just a minute about that, because I know that there's been some discussion and some question about, boy, if everybody in Scotland just developed their own TID, people would be going all in different directions. Well, the way we look at it is in a series of concentric circles, right? We have in the US, Brand USA, which is responsible for bringing foreign visitors to the US. We have in California, Visit California, which is their job is to bring visitors to California. And then we have individual destinations whose job it is to bring them to those individual destinations. And here in Napa Valley, this organization brings those visitors to Napa Valley and then gives 25% of its money to those local cities to say, now bring them to your local cities. So the cities of Napa and Yountville and St. Helena and Calistoga, all these cities get 25% of the money raised there, and they promote the local cities. It's a system that works very, very well, and they've had some tremendous results, all the way back double-digit increases in annual lodging revenues year over year for several years, and you can see still posting numbers of 9.5% increase in total revenue in the destination. Their ADR is up, their occupancy is up, their revenues are doing phenomenally well. One other case study I wanted to share with you, I cannot hold on to that remote. And then one other case study I wanted to share with you is that of Visit California. This is another very large organization, but I thought it was interesting to share this concept. Because we have so many of these throughout California, there's all kinds of destinations. There's urban destinations, there's rural destinations, there's beach destinations, and we've got ski destinations. In fact, I know the folks here from Sweden were looking at somehow on the tourism front incorporating potentially a TID. We've got some ski-centric tourism improvement districts in Mammoth and in Lake Tahoe, among others. Visit California is responsible for marketing California as a whole. They have an activities and budget plan, they write a marketing plan, and they assess industries across the state. On lodging, their amount of assessment is 0.2%, just under 0.2%. So it's a relatively small amount, but they also assess restaurants and retail that have tourism revenues in excess of $1 million. And overall, this structure, with all of these various components, including car rental and including others, raises about $100 million a year to market California. They have a 37-member board, and you can see it's a significant structure. The one other thing I did want to share with you, there's so much more to tell you, and I'm sure you have lots of questions. I'll be happy to answer your questions here today, or if you would like to email me, you're welcome to do that as well. What we've also done at CIVITAS is we created a website just for information about these districts, and we call it tourismimprovementdistrict.com. tourismimprovementdistrict.com, and what we post here is information about these districts. So all 153 districts that are out there, including Inverness, you will find on this list, on this website. We also post articles. Whenever we see articles on any districts like this, we also post laws. We try to post as much information as we can to make this really useful to people as a resource. So with that, I will say thank you. Thank you for having me here today.